Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video we're going to learn the 1 to 6 player game, Libertalia, Winds of Galecrest, designed by Paolo Mori and published by Stonemaier Games, who helped sponsor this video. Here you'll be assembling a very special pirate crew, one that sets sail in large airborne crafts, seeking treasure by flying from island to island, setting down to dig up precious loot. But be careful, because other bands of pirates are after the same thing. Libertalia Winds of Galecrest is based on the popular Libertalia from 2012. This new edition builds on the original design with new art, characters, tweaks to the rules, updates to the 2-player game, and even a solo mode. But if you've never played the original, no worries, because I'll teach you everything you need to know right here. So join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, put the double-sided game board on the table. Now, the differences between the two sides are found in these 7 boxes, which define the loot abilities that we'll learn about later. This side shows stormy artwork and offers a more complex game with devious effects, while the other side features calm artwork with friendlier abilities that we'll use in this video. However, when you're ready for another option, find these double-sided loot tiles. Each of these shows one of the types of loot with their calm effect on one side and stormy on the other. To use these, you'll shuffle and then place them with a random side face up into the matching colored spaces. This is called the uncharted setup, where you'll have a mix of calm and stormy abilities. We won't be using the uncharted setup tiles, so we'll return all of them back to the box. Beside the board, set the included tray filled with 3 different denominations of tokens worth 1, 3, and 5 doubloons. Also add all of these loot tokens to the included bag and set that nearby as well. The game comes with 6 differently colored decks, which you can distinguish by their backs, and each deck contains the same 40 unique characters. Every player will pick a deck in their chosen color, and we'll assume we have 3 players, returning the rest back to the box. Along with their deck, each player also takes one of these score dials, setting it to 0, and also collects one of these graveyard tiles. Now gather these reputation tokens, which show the various player colors, and you'll use all of them no matter how many players you have, mixing them and then setting them randomly onto these spaces of what is known as the reputation track. I should mention the setup for a 2-player game is slightly different, but I'll go over the few required adjustments for 2-player games at the end of this video. Otherwise, that's the setup. In Libertalia Winds of Galecrest, players will be picking crew members to send to islands filled with treasures, but other pirates are arriving at the same time, and their crew members will certainly interfere with your plans, so you'll have to be crafty to ensure you find the best loot possible. The game is played over 3 voyages, and each voyage is broken into a certain number of days that you'll spend raiding a variety of islands. But before we get to all that plundering, there are a few steps we must always follow at the very start of a new voyage. First, you place random loot tokens from the bag equal to the number of players into this Day 1 box of the board. Then draw and fill days 2 through 4 in the same way. Day 5 is only filled when setting up voyages 2 and 3, and day 6 is only used in the 3rd voyage. Now pick any one of the players to shuffle up their character deck, drawing 6 cards from it, which they then reveal to the other players. Each card will show a unique crew member with a rank value from 1 to 40, a name, and a special ability. Every other player now finds these same matching crew members from their own decks, so it can be helpful for only one player to shuffle their deck, while the others keep theirs in numerical order to make it easier for them to find the matching cards. Now players check the reputation track and gain the doubloons matching the value beside their colored marker. So as an example, the blue player here would collect 10 doubloons. And that's how you prepare to set sail on a new voyage. And each voyage is broken into a certain number of days based on how many loot boxes you filled in on the board. We filled in 4 boxes, which means the first voyage will always take place over 4 days. Now at the start of each new day, players examine the cards they have in their hand and secretly pick one of them, putting it face down in front of themselves. Now, we'll see why you might want to pick certain ones a little later, but keep in mind, every player currently has the same hand of cards, so you know what options they have. Again, at least for now. Once all the players have made their selections, everyone's chosen crew members are flipped face up. Now, based on these rank values in their corners, organize the revealed crew members in order from lowest to highest, starting from the leftmost of these island spaces found here at the top of the board. If you ever have more than one of the same characters revealed at the same time, you'll order them based on the reputations of the players. Your player reputation is based on the location of your token on this reputation track, and these are valued from lowest to highest, going from left to right. So in this game between green, blue, and black, black's reputation currently is higher than blue and green's, and blue's is higher than green's. So if black and green chose the same character, the player with the higher reputation, in this case black, would put their character further to the right. In this case, though, we'll assume that these were the characters that the players chose. With crew members assigned, we now resolve a day of plundering, and each day is broken into 3 phases, starting with daytime. Beginning at the left and going to the right, one at a time, each player activates their character's daytime ability if it has one. A daytime ability will show this symbol, and since this card was furthest to the left and it has a daytime effect, it will resolve first. And when one of your crew abilities are resolving, you must fulfill it as completely as you can, ignoring any part of the ability that you can't. For example, this ability says to play a character from your hand, but if you had no characters in your hand, you'd just ignore this effect. We're not going to go through all the various crew abilities in this video, as how they work will make sense to you once you understand the full rules, but we will examine some of them as we go along. For example, this Beggar's Daytime effect says that the character furthest to the right of the island row must give you 2 doubloons. So black would now give blue these 2 doubloons if they had them. If not, they would just give what they have. Now this effect also says that the targeted player gains 1 reputation. When you gain an amount of reputation, you move your token that many spaces to the right, sliding other tokens to the left to make room. And this process works the same way when you lose reputation. You would just move your token in the other direction and adjust the pieces as required. Now, if you would ever lose more reputation than there are spaces to move, for each space you should have moved but couldn't, lose 1 doubloon as shown here. In the same way, if you gain more reputation on the track than the spaces allow, you take 1 doubloon for each space you couldn't advance. As I mentioned, we're not going to go over every ability, but I want to mention quickly that if an effect refers to an adjacent player, this means a player seated directly to your left or right. Okay, with that understood, let's go back to the daytime phase, and with the beggar finished, we'd move to the carpenter, where that player resolves its daytime effect, and it says here they would lose half their doubloons. And then we go to the armorer, but since they don't have a daytime effect, this card is just skipped over. Once you finish with the rightmost character, you then go from the daytime phase to the dusk phase. This time, beginning with the rightmost character and going left, at each player's crew member, you resolve the following steps. First, that player picks any one of the loot tokens from the current day, if any of them remain. Now, we're on the first day, so they'd pick a token from this box. Let's say they take this red one. Any loot you collect is put in front of yourself in an area known as your ship, and anything in your ship should remain visible to all players. It is possible that during the dusk phase when you're activating your character and you're going to take loot, there won't be any there, due to various effects that might have resolved previously on different character abilities. And in that case, you won't take anything during this part of your dusk phase. But either way, after that step, whether you gained loot or not, if your character on the island or the loot token you just gained has a dusk ability, you resolve them now in the order of your choosing. For example, the dusk effect on this armorer says that if the player had just collected a saber or hook token, they gain 2 reputation. Each token's name is printed on the boxes down here, and since the token I took is a saber, I'd gain the 2 reputation from the armorer's effect. The loot token itself also has an ability printed in its box, and you'll notice that for the saber, this is a dusk effect, so it resolves during this step as well. And this one says that I discard another player's character from the island. Let's say the armorer decides to discard the blue player's character here. Anytime a crew member is discarded, you set it face down on its original player's graveyard. And a player can examine their own graveyard at any time, but its contents are kept secret from the other players. Abilities on other crew members, like this one, might allow you to interact or even bring back crew members from your graveyard. So to summarize, in the Dusk Phase, when you're activating your character, you first gain a loot token if there's any in the current day's box, and then you resolve any Dusk effect on that character and or on the loot token you just collected. And you can resolve those effects in either order. The last step of resolving a character in the Dusk Phase is to remove it from the island if it's still there, and place it face up in your ship, which, as we mentioned earlier, is the area in front of you on the table. Then the next player in the rightmost space resolves their turn, and even if they don't have a Dusk effect on their crew member, they still gain a loot token from the box for that day. The only time you wouldn't gain a loot token is if none are left, or if a Dusk effect tells you not to, like we see here on this cabin boy. Once all the characters on the island have performed their Dusk Phase, if any loot tokens remain on the current day's box, you put them back in the bag. So we've done the daytime phase, the Dusk Phase, and now we come to the last phase of the day, nighttime. And instead of taking turns, here everyone performs this at the same time. Here, you'll look for any night symbols on the characters in the area in front of you known as your ship, or from loot tokens with nighttime effect symbols that you also have in your ship. And then you resolve those related abilities. For example, this effect will give you 1 doubloon for each saber and hook loot token you've collected. But here's the important thing to keep in mind. During every night phase, you'll resolve all of the night effects in your ship. So on this player's next night phase, they'll resolve this effect again. And if you have more than 1 night symbol, you resolve them all in any order you like. Now, once everyone has finished the night phase, that day ends, and it's time to move on to the next day, which works the same way, with each person picking one of the cards in their hand as their new crew member to visit the next island. Then they're revealed and placed in order by rank on the island track. From left to right, players now resolve one at a time any day icons. Then you resolve the Dusk Phase from right to left, but this time gaining loot from the new day's box and resolving any Dusk effects they generate, along with any on the crew member that's activating. Now, it's very important to understand that any daytime or Dusk effects on crew members and loot tokens that were already in your ship because they were collected on a previous day, these do not resolve. Those effects only resolve when those characters are in the island line or when they're collected and resolved at dusk. However, after dusk, all nighttime effects on the crew in your ship, whether you just collected or had them previously, all of those effects do resolve, as we learned earlier. And each day is repeated like this until the final day's loot box is emptied. And unless an effect says otherwise, any loot from a box that is not collected during its Dusk Phase is automatically returned to the bag. With the 4th day complete, you've come to the end of your first voyage. And at the end of a voyage, there's always a few steps you have to complete. First, activate all abilities showing this anchor symbol from the characters and loot in your ship. And you can do this in any order you like. If a loot token has an anchor ability, you'll find that described on the related box of the board. Now, I said you can resolve anchor abilities in any order you like, but you can't choose an order that would prevent you from losing coins that you're meant to lose. Let me give you an example. If I have 1 doubloon and an anchor ability that causes me to lose 6, and another that lets me gain 6, I can't choose to lose the 6th doubloon first, dropping me to 0, and then gain the 6th doubloon from this effect to end up with 6. I would have to gain the 6th doubloon first. So if I started with 1, I would then gain the 6th doubloon, bringing me to 7, so then I'm able to resolve this effect as much as possible, losing 6, and being left with just 1 doubloon. In other words, you can't manipulate the order that effects are resolved in to avoid negative consequences during this or any step where you get to choose the order that effects resolve in. So even during the Dusk Phase or the Daytime Phase, this rule still applies. If there's an order that would allow you to more fully suffer a negative consequence, you must follow that order. Make sense? Okay, once your anchor abilities are resolved, you now increase the score on your dial by the number of doubloons you currently have. I have 11, so I've added that amount to my dial. And now players return all of the doubloons they have back to the supply. You can think of this as burying the treasure that you've collected so far. It's now safely stored on your dial and can't be affected. In the future, when you gain doubloons again, anytime you're forced to lose more than you have, you just return as many of the doubloon tokens you have. You do not remove any of the extras from your dial. This is protected. Also, the score on your dial is open information, so everyone should be able to see what everyone has. And if your score would ever exceed 99, just use extra doubloon tokens and place them on your dial as a way of recording your current wealth. And if you ever run out of doubloon tokens in the supply, just use a suitable replacement. Alright, with the dials scored and doubloons returned to the supply, everyone puts all the loot tokens in their ship back into the bag, unless a crew or loot effect says otherwise. Every crew member in your ship is also put face down into your graveyard, again, unless an effect tells you differently. It's now time to start a new voyage, which begins, you might remember, by having one player draw and reveal 6 cards from their shuffled deck, while everyone else finds the same ones. However, it's likely players will still have 1 or more cards left in their hand from the previous rounds, which they'll add to these 6. And it means that each player might now have slightly different hands going into the next voyage. Also, don't forget to set up the loot boxes by adding tokens to them, remembering that you fill in 5 of the boxes for the second voyage. Also, at the start of a new voyage, don't forget to have each player gain the doubloon value showing beside their reputation token. Then resolve the days of this voyage in the same way, with a daytime, a dusk, a nighttime, and when all the days are finished, you resolve any anchor abilities, you then add any doubloons you've collected to your score dials, and then discard your doubloons, loot tokens and characters, and begin the third and final voyage, but this time, fill all 6 of the loot boxes, giving you 6 days of islands to visit. At the end of that final third voyage, players will compare their score dials, and the person with the highest total wins. If there's a tie, the tied player with the highest reputation wins. And that's how you play if you have 3 to 6 players. But now, let me quickly cover the adjustments for a 2-player game. During setup, you randomly put the colored tokens of the 2 players into these central spaces, with the rest placed randomly on either side. Unlike regular beginnings to a voyage where you put a number of loot tokens equal to the number of players into each day's box, you instead always add 3 to each in a 2-player game. Also add this midshipman tile to the board, covering the second and third spaces of this island area. Now, after the 2 players reveal their chosen cards for the day, they put them into the spaces of the island row as usual, but relative to the midshipman's rank, which has a value of 20.5. Let's say both of our players have values less than 20.5, they would then fill in these 2 spaces like this. Now when you're in the Dusk Phase and get to the midshipman, it will not collect a loot token, but its effect says that the opponent of the character in the space directly to the midshipman's left now picks 1 loot token from that day's box and returns it to the bag. Let me give you a full example. So if this midshipman's effect was resolving, here is the character directly to its left. So this player's opponent, which is blue in this case, would now get to remove any one of these tokens from the box and return it to the bag. So now when it gets to this player's Dusk Phase, they have fewer pieces to choose from. This effect can get especially interesting if only one player has revealed a card that would need to go to the left of the midshipman. As it says here, if your character is the only one revealed at a rank of 20 or less, you must now set it into this space. So to show you how this would work now, I've reset the day 1 box, and let's say we're at the Dusk Phase. That means this player will first get to collect one of these loot tokens. Then when this card resolves, the Dusk effect here says we look at the character in this position, if any, and then that player's opponent gets to remove any one of these pieces and return it to the bag. And that means when it's this player's Dusk Phase, they'll now be forced to take this loot token. And some of these loot tokens, like the relic, have negative effects, so you normally wouldn't want to take them. Otherwise, the 2-player game works just the same as the higher player counts. But don't forget, you can also play this game solo. To do this, you'll need to use these additional components included in the game and read the separate solo mode rules, which I'll leave for you to discover on your own. But otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Libertalia Winds of Galecrest. If you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. And if you'd like to support us directly, you can join our Patreon team, which I'll have linked below. But until next time, thanks for watching.